Good morning, folks. It is Wednesday, May 16th, 2013, and I'm making this video as a response to a piece that Lawrence O Donnell did on I think on the 30th of April, regarding Rand Paul and Ron Paul. First, I'll take a moment to somewhat agree with you, Lawrence, on Rand Paul's position seeming to shift from drones never being used on American citizens to the comment he made about somebody leaving a liquor store with a gun and $50. I'm not necessarily a stand with Rand guy. There's a lot of things that I disagree with him on. That newfound position on predator drones, I don't think they have any place on American soil. It's pretty much a weapon of war. Definitely, if they're going to be used for surveillance, you'd need a warrant, but I'm not a big fan of drones. I'm not a stand with Rand guy, like I said, and this is definitely one spot where I disagree with him. I do appreciate the filibuster and many of the other positions that he's taken, but this is not one of them. What I'd really like to address, though, is the statements that you made about Ron Paul. Now, you quoted a statement that he made from LouRockwell.com, and it began with a forced lockdown, and you called him a liar several times. So let me just preface this with saying that I was in Boston Thursday night. I actually met you with Luke Rudowski from We Are Change. I shook your hand and said a few words with you about Ron Paul and about another thing that you had reported on where you had to retract your statement. All that aside, you were telling Luke how your nephew was always talking about We Are Change, etc., etc. I'm sure you probably remember. At any rate, back to the statements that you made about Ron Paul's statement. You spoke about the forced lockdown. I can say unequivocally from statements that I've seen residents make online from one of my best friends who happened to be working in Watertown that day and got turned around from a good friend of mine's father-in-law who lives in Watertown. There absolutely was a forced lockdown. They were doing door-to-door searches. I don't think there's too many people that really want a bunch of cops walking through their house in any type of circumstance. There were witnesses. There were people who were their homes were searched that made statements that they were left with a general feeling that if they didn't cooperate, that they were going to have some sort of problem from the police. One gentleman stated that throughout the course of the whole event, he had somebody stationed on his porch with a shotgun, to the extent that he kept calling this law enforcement officer, "Hey, shotgun, hey, shotgun." So you don't have all the facts right as far as the forced lockdown. I don't care if they called it shelter in place or whatever nice words they used in their press conference. That is not what it was. What it was a martial law lockdown of about 100 square miles from Watertown to Boston and everything in between. Watertown being the most severe. Now, I don't know what you saw in the Boston area on Thursday night, but before I ran into you with Luke Rudowski and the gentleman from Gray State, GrayStateMovie.com. We happened to be over. We were over at Boston Common, and we witnessed and took footage of what I would say about a company of National Guard, maybe 150 National Guard and 15 Humvees. Now, for you to, I didn't see any tanks in Boston, but for you to say that, the police or whoever was driving around in something about as scary as an armored truck, it is pretty scary when you see law enforcement officers that are militarized, conducting themselves as military, with those god-awful, what do you call them, automatic weapons. Yeah, only law enforcement and military should have automatic weapons, right? Yeah, it's pretty intimidating. So yeah, maybe it wasn't tanks, but is definitely an atmosphere of fear that was created. Um, I was standing about 15 feet from Aaron Burnett when when the call came in that a 7-Eleven had been robbed, and then that an MIT officer had been shot. I was right there, right in Copley Square, standing right next to the media when they were getting the calls and they were reviewing the footage and stuff like that. So, you know, as you like to say that Ron Paul had all these lies, families thrown out of their homes at gunpoint. No, they were not maybe necessarily pointing guns directly at people, but weapons were drawn. Businesses were forced to close. I think it was estimated, I'm not even going to say how much money was lost, but there were definitely businesses closed. The company that I worked for at the time lost money that day because I worked for a construction company and nobody could get into Watertown where we had a project running. Um, you know, I want to go back to the interview that you did with Luke Rudowski. You know, you're very well spoken, conducted yourself like a gentleman, and you stated that, it takes a lot of work, a lot of research to either disagree or agree with Luke Rudowski and the work that he does. So let me give you a little bit of a homework assignment, Lawrence. Um, I dare you. I dare you to do the work that it takes to disagree with someone like Luke Rudowski, who also got an interview with Aaron Burnett that night, asked her about the drills that were being run, and it didn't even sound vaguely familiar to her. There were, in fact, drills going off for several hours, or at least a few hours, in and around the marathon. Um, I stood right there when an Iraq vet was interviewed, and he unequivocally stated he knew what he was looking at when he saw, for hours on end, them using bomb-sniffing dogs, working the dogs back and forth. And he also stated that he was in the Cheesecake Factory when the first bomb went off, and within 2 minutes they were locked down, they were locked inside, they couldn't leave the Cheesecake Factory. If that's not a lockdown, I don't know what is. If a law enforcement officer standing on your front porch with a shotgun isn't a lockdown, I don't know what is. Going door to door with a Humvee on either side of the house in Watertown, if that's not a forced lockdown, I don't know what is. But I dare you to do the research that it takes to disagree with a Luke Rudowski or an Alex Jones when it comes to anything. You take your pick. The Boston Marathon, Benghazi, Fast and Furious, 9/11. Go right back. Let's go back to where it all started on 9/11, and our world changed forever. And this police state descended upon the United States of America. Okay, because I only need to refer to 6 out of 10 9/11 Commission members saying that they were prevented from actually performing a legitimate investigation into 9/11. Let me give you a Ron Paul quote. Okay, government invites conspiracy, and I would just like to know, Mr. O'Donnell, do you have any phone records that you don't want President Obama and his White House snooping through? I dare you. I dare you. Do the same amount of research. Not just the talking points that get passed down to you, the controlled talking points that go to you and go to Fox and go to CNN, because really, it doesn't matter if it's left or right mainstream media. You all end up being talking pieces. You're just mouthpieces for whatever administration happens to be in power. Do the research to prove Luke Rudowski wrong. Do the research to prove Alex Jones or Adam Kokesh or Mark Dice. Do the research it takes to prove the things that they say wrong. Because at the end of the day, Mr. O'Donnell, I'm pretty sure that if you put in the individual work that it takes to pick apart the news that they come out with, why don't you interview Sibel Edmonds, FBI whistleblower Sibel Edmonds? Interview her. Why don't you get Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer from Operation Dark Heart? Get him on the horn. Why don't you interview Amber Lyon whistleblower against CNN that was taking bribes from Bahrain. That's the problem. The problem is mainstream media. You don't you whitewash everything, and you got maybe a couple of million dumbed down people in your audience that just sit there and think that they're getting the truth. You're doing the American people an injustice and a disservice by spreading the filth that you spread. Do the research, Lawrence. Be on the right side of history.